Shalom, everybody. We'll wait just a minute or two to give anyone else the opportunity to join. Excuse me. Okay, testing 1, 2. Testing. 1 minute and we shall begin. All right, shalom, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to tonight's Mishkan class, number 8, the second to final of this series of classes on the Mishkan, where we will be discussing the final steps of building the walls of the Mishkan courtyard, which is the attaching of the tapestries to the pillars, which we've built in the previous classes. So on the menu for today's class, we will begin with a review of our previous classes, and we will continue to go more into depth into the walls of the courtyard. Specifically, how we connect the pillars of the courtyard to the tapestries to form a complete wall using the hooks at the top of the pillar the ropes that attached the pillar to the ground and to the tapestries, and finally the tapestry that was hung to create the wall itself of the Mishkan courtyard. We're going to discuss how this is the concept of connecting our pillars to our Mishkan vision, and in doing so, weaving our daily practices, which are the pillars of our Mishkan, into a full form of the Mishkan life. And we will illustrate this with a teaching from Rabbi Nachman and conclude with a story from Rabbi Nachman, which I hope will give us a little bit of an inner and deeper insight to the concepts that we're discussing. And we'll finish off with some homework in order to apply these concepts to our lives. So, just to take a moment to look at the form of the Mishkan and how the courtyard of the Mishkan was constructed, you can see here this white wall surrounding the Mishkan courtyard is what we're discussing. And you can see the 60 pillars forming the wall, and you can see how each pillar is connected to the ground with a rope that goes to a copper peg in the ground. And at the top of each pillar, which we'll see in a closer illustration, it's also connected to that white tapestry itself. And so to review our previous classes, we've discussed how the construction of the Mishkan is the fulfillment of the purpose of creation. Like the Alter Rebbe, the Baal HaTanya says, V'zeh kol adam v'tachlit briyato ubriya kol alamot elyonim v'tachtonim liod lo litbara dira azu v'tachtonim. That the whole purpose of the creation of man and all of the worlds, the upper worlds and the lower worlds, is that so Hashem Yisparach should have a dwelling place here in this physical world. And this is what we call a dwelling place for the Shechina, which is the divine presence as she is revealed within this physical world, which is the manifestation of, or we could say the other part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is how we refer to Hashem, HaKadosh being separate and distinct from the world, while Shechina being from the root, the shorsh of Shochen, to dwell within the world. We discussed how this purpose of creation is not just a grand historical concept, but is actually relevant to each and every Jew. Like the Shalach Kodesh famously says on the pasuk describing the commandment to build the Mishkan, that the Torah says, Hashem tells to us, V'asuli Mikdash v'shechanti b'tocham, build me a holy space and I will dwell within them. We would expect the verse to say within it, but it says b'tocham, within them. The Shalach Kodesh says this means that Hashem will dwell within each and every Jew. And where do we fulfill this purpose of creation in our personal lives? It's specifically the place where we fulfill it is within our homes and our family relationships. As Rabbi Akiva teaches, that if a husband and wife merit, the Shechina dwells between them, fulfilling this concept of the Shechina dwelling within the family home and within the marriage relationship. And our sages would also call the Jewish home a Mikdash Me'at, a Microcosmic Holy Temple or Mishkan. And when we apply this spiritual framework of the Mishkan to our lives, it fills our life with meaning and purpose and practically creates a vessel for bracha. How does it do this? By building this shared concept of the Mishkan, and by applying these teachings in our daily home life, we start to build a shared vision, a shared language, and a clear actionable framework with our spouse and with our family. And in doing so, we fulfill these three aspects of the Mishkan: the dwelling of the Shechina, the illumination of Kedusha, holiness, and the welcoming, the fulfillment of Shalom, of peace. And like our sages said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Hashem did not find a more fitting vessel for bracha, for blessing, other than peace. At the center of all of this, our guiding vision is the Mishkan vision, which we continuously create and refine with our spouse, with our husband, with our wife, which is what do we envision our life to be when we are fulfilling all of these spiritual concepts of the Mishkan. We place this Mishkan vision in the center point of our life so that every element of our life can become aligned with that vision, in order supporting that vision, helping us to fulfill that vision and bring it from potential into reality. And in order to create the conditions where we can actually practically build this Mishkan vision, one of the first steps we have to put in place is the boundaries of our home, the spiritual, practical, and emotionally boundaries of our home, to say this is what we are allowing in the door, and this is what we are not, what we're welcoming in. We're saying, no, you are staying outside the boundaries of our Mishkan. And practically how the boundary of the Mishkan space was created by Am Yisrael in the desert was in the wall of the Mishkan courtyard, which was constructed through the pillars, the amudim, and the linen tapestry that was hung between all of these pillars. And we have been focusing the last two classes on the architecture of these pillars, how the bottom, the foundation of the pillar, was made of copper that corresponds to our fixed determination, our holy stubbornness to fulfill the pillars, to sustain, to stand up the pillars of our life, which are our fixed daily practices. And we discussed the need to connect each of our fixed daily practices to the amudim, to the pillars of the world, which are Torah, Avodah, and Gemilut Hasidim, the study and fulfillment of Torah, Avodah, which is prayer and the practical work of building up our life and building up the world, in Gemilut Hasidim, which is loving kindness, acts of kindness. And so in this class, we will complete our exploration of this architecture of the pillars and explore how these pillars were interconnected to build the wall of the courtyard of the Mishkan. And here we are. So here we see a beautiful illustration of the Levim and Kohanim working together to construct the courtyard of the Mishkan. You can see how they were standing up these tall pillars with their ropes and hanging between the pillars the linen tapestry that formed the wall of the courtyard of the Mishkan. Torah says, and you shall make the courtyard of the Mishkan, and on the southern side shall be hangings for the courtyard of twisted fine linen, 100 cubits long on one side. So it was also on the northern side, and as well a smaller dimension on the western and eastern side, with the eastern side having the entrance to the Mishkan, which we'll discuss in our final class of this series. And so Rashi goes into more detail about how these pillars and the walls were constructed. Rashi says, and their sockets, i.e. the sockets, the foundations of the pillars, were copper. The sockets rested on the ground, and the pillars were inserted into them. He, Bezalel, made a sort of rod, and this rod was 6 handbreadths long and 3 handbreadths wide, with a copper ring affixed to it in the middle. And he would wrap the edge of the hanging, this linen tapestry, around the rod with cords placed opposite every pillar. And he would hang each rod by its ring from the hook that was on each pillar. And the hook was made resembling a sort of vav, its end upright, and one end inserted into the pillar, like those hooks made to hold up doors, which are called gons, hinges, in Old French. The width of the hanging hung below the hooks, and this was the height of the partitions, the walls of the courtyard. Bezrat Hashem, I'm going to try to get the book from which these classes are based on, which has very detailed illustrations of each element of the Mishkan. But for now, we'll work from these beautiful illustrations from the Temple Institute. So, to put this in a little bit easier to understand language, we begin by setting up the foundations of the pillars of the Mishkan courtyard and standing up the pillars. But at this stage, there's no courtyard, only 60 pillars arranged in a rectangle. On each pillar was a silver hook that Rabbi Yoel brought, and we need to find the source for this, that this silver hook was also plated with gold. And on this hook was attached a rod, and to the rod was attached 1, ropes which were tied to a peg, connecting the pillars to the ground so that the pillar could stand strong and sturdy, and 2, the linen hangings, a mesh-like tapestry which formed the walls of the courtyard. By tying each pillar to the ropes and pegs and hanging the pillars with the linen tapestry, the pillars joined together to create a continuous wall, defining the space of the Mishkan courtyard and creating a container for the holiness of the divine presence, the Shechina. So, what were these hangings? The Hebrew for the hangings is kilayim, and Rashi says on these hangings, the kilayim, that they were made like the sails of a ship with many holes, braided and not the work of a weaver. So how I imagine this is like a braided net, creating like a mesh tapestry that would make the wall. And for me, we'll come back to this, but this image teaches us the idea of the interconnection of all of the pillars, all of our daily practices. When each of them is connected, it creates this meshwork connecting every moment of our life to our Mishkan vision. So we see from this concept that Rabbi Yoel brought, that the vav, the hook at the top of the pillar, was coated in gold, that each pillar contains all of the 3 precious metals of the Mishkan, copper, silver, and gold. And so too, each pillar, each daily practice that we build in our home contains all 3 levels, from the lowest level of copper to the highest level of gold. From specifically the gold-plated hooks, we attach the ropes and tapestries, joining the wall of the Mishkan courtyard into its complete form, and connecting the walls to the earth itself. And in doing so, by connecting the walls to the earth itself and forming the complete wall of the Mishkan, elevate even the earthen floor of the Mishkan to the Kedusha, the holiness of Eretz Yisrael and the base of Mikdash. So gold is the first material listed in the construction of the Mishkan. And what is the power of gold in the world? Apparently, if someone has a lot of money, he's a millionaire, so he has a lot of gold. For all of history, the economy of the world has been based on gold. It seems as if gold has power in itself, and the more money, which is backed by gold, that a person has, the more power they have. This holds true for every material in the Mishkan, every material thing that we need, that we have in our life. It seems like each material has a power in itself. But the truth is that each material only has power because of the purpose for which Hashem created that material. This purpose is the source of the power and the value that any material has. As our sages teach, gold was only created for the sake of the Holy Temple. Gold corresponds to the most inner part of our Mishkan vision, as the Aron Kodesh, the Holy Ark of the Covenant, and also all of the other vessels, the menorah, the table of the showbread, the incense altar, that were in the inner chamber, all plated in gold. And so, when we connect each of our pillars, our simple daily practices, to the inner vision of our Mishkan, we weave each of the pillars into the complete form of the Mishkan courtyard. Likewise, this golden vision has the power to join the highest inspiration to the lowest element of copper, the foundations of the pillars, and the pegs which held the ropes of the pillars into the earth itself, elevating even the very earth itself, elevating it to the holiness of Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, and the base of Mikdash, the Holy Temple. So there were 7 materials that every person had to bring to build the Mishkan. There were 15 materials total that Am Yisrael brought to the Mishkan, and there were 7 that were brought by the people in general. These 7 were gold, silver, copper, techelet, the blue dyed wool, argaman, the purple dyed wool, tolashani, the crimson dyed wool, and shesh, linen. And Rabbi Yoel teaches that these materials are 7 angels that connect between spirituality and materiality. So these 7 gifts that everyone brought were each connected with one of these angels. And the role of the angel is to bring something from spirituality to materiality. If not for this, we would not have any connection between the spiritual and material realms. As we develop a sensitivity for the spirituality of each material, each activity in our life, each physical object in our life, we can perceive more clearly Hashem's purpose in creating this material, and we can perceive more clearly the purpose of our daily practices, of our daily activities. Rabbi Yoel says, you may think that your day in your home is filled with many independent activities: washing the clothes, preparing a meal, cleaning the floor, opening a book, learning a halacha. You can make the mistake that you're just doing many details. The pillars come to show in the way that they connect, how you're creating a chain. And when you create this chain, your day becomes an amazing art piece that you, your wife, your husband, your children are all creating, and that's all connected together. When we understand this, it can change the perspective of our life. It brings another dimension. The beauty of your day, of your family, becomes something amazing because you all work together to create and build this space. If you make a list of everything in your day, every little action, you'll see how they're all connected. Every action builds your Mishkan, and just like the Mishkan, every detail and every material from top to bottom connects to the complete form. So I found a beautiful teaching from Rabbi Nachman that I think can help us bring even more depth to this concept. Rabbi Nachman teaches that whatever labors and works people engage in awaken the spirit, the supernal form of that work in the act of creation, in the Maaseh Bereshit. It also brings vitality and illumination to the supernal form of that work associated with the act of creation on high, which parallels that labor and work a person engages in below in this world. That is to say, every small action and activity that we do here in this physical world corresponds and connects to a spiritual activity in the upper realms, which are part of the Maaseh Bereshit, the acts of creation of the world itself. And the labors and works that we engage in create the Mishkan. All works are included in the 39 works through which the Mishkan was built, namely the primary works, the Avot. Primary implies that there are also derivatives, Toldot. All the types of work and labor that people engage in are included in these 39 works. These 39 works are the primary ones, and the rest are derivatives. As we mentioned in the previous class, every single creative action that is in the world is derived from the 39 creative activities through which the Mishkan was constructed. And so these 39 works correspond to the works of the Mishkan. As our sages of blessed memory, as Chazal says, What do the 40 less 1 primary works parallel? They parallel the works of the Mishkan. For the forms of the Mishkan resembled the forms of the Maaseh Bereshit, the act of the creation of the world. And they parallel the human who does the work, for the form of the human body resembles the form of the Mishkan. It follows that by a person engaging in work, in labor, creative activity, a Mishkan is created. And when he performs the work in labor, the creative activity fittingly, the way that he should, he gives vitality to the act of creation, to the Maaseh Bereshit, and illuminates it. And his labor is the world's mainstay, it sustains the world. It follows, too, that this is the service of God, meaning that every creative activity that we participate in during our day has the potential to be in the service of Hashem. Further, Rabbi Nachman teaches anything that bears Hashem's will, anything that's connected to God, to Hashem's ratzon, is called a mitzvah. For there are 613 mitzvot, and these 613 mitzvot have many branches. Thus, any activity that we do that is connected, that is fulfilling Hashem's ratzon, God's will, through which one pleases Avinu Shebashamayim, our Father in heaven, this activity is a mitzvah. So we see from this teaching the potential that our simple daily activities, when they are connected to our Mishkan vision, and when our Mishkan vision is connected to Hashem's vision for the perfection and completeness in the world, this illuminates even a simple activity like washing the dishes, taking out the garbage, changing a diaper, has the light of a mitzvah, like putting on tefillin, like learning Torah, like going to shul. So we'll conclude with an excerpt from a story from Rabbi Nachman, from the beautiful, beautiful story from Zikori Maisiot of the 7 beggars of the third day, with the beggar. It's definitely worth reading this entire story from finish and enjoying it a lot. But on the third day, when they're celebrating the wedding of the 2 orphans who were lost in the forest and encountered these 7 beggars, each of them who provided them with bread and blessed them. So in the 7 days of their Sheva Brachot, the celebration after the wedding, each of these beggars comes again and tells over their story and gives their blessing as a complete gift. And so on the third day comes the beggar who was Kaved Pei, who had a speech impediment, Kaved Pei being the same description as Moshe Rabbeinu, who had a Kaved Pei, who was heavy in the mouth, he had a speech impediment. And he says, this beggar, it seems like I have a speech impediment, but in truth, my speech is filled with all the wisdom and all the riddles and all of the wisdom of the sciences of the world. And from this, I have a haskama, I have a approbation from the Ish Chesed Emet, the truly gracious man, the man of true kindness. And this is his story. So this is the story. For the Ish Chesed Emet, the true man of kindness, is in truth a very great man. And I, that is the speech-impaired beggar who is telling all this, go about gathering up all the true kindnesses and bring them to the true man, the man of true kindness, Ish Chesed Emet. Now, the root of time's creation, that is, that such a thing as time should exist. For time itself, that is the very existence of years and days in the world, is itself also a creation created by Hashem Yisbarach. And time is created solely through true kindness, Chesed Emet. And I, the beggar says, go about and gather up all the true kindnesses and bring them to the Ish Chesed Emet, the true man of kindness, the man of true kindness, resulting in time coming into being. Now, There is a mountain, and on the mountain stands a stone, and from the stone emerges a spring. Now everything has a heart, and the entire world also has a heart. In the heart of the world is complete structure, with face, hands, and feet. But the toenail of the foot of the world's heart is more hearty, has more heart than the heart of anything else in the world. And the mountain with the stone and the spring stands at one end of the world, while this heart of the world stands at another end of the world. And the heart stands facing the spring, desiring and hoping continuously, exceedingly, that it should come to the spring. And the longing and desire of the heart to come to the spring is just extraordinary. It cries out nonstop, the heart, to come to the source. And the source, the spring, longs for the heart too. Now this heart has two things that make it weak. One, because the sun pursues it exceedingly and scorches it, because it always yearns and desires to come to the source, the spring. And the second thing that tires the heart is due to its yearning and desiring, that the heart constantly yearns and wishes. It keeps pouring out its soul for the spring and screaming and so forth, so as to come to the spring. For the heart is always standing facing the spring and screams, Na Gevad, and keeps on yearning most exceedingly for the spring as mentioned. However, when the heart needs to rest a bit so as to draw a little breath, then comes a giant bird and spreads its wings above it, shielding it. Then the heart gets a little rest. But even then, while resting, it also looks facing the spring and still longs for it. But since it longs so much for the spring, why doesn't it go to the spring? Only as soon as the heart wants to go close to the mountain on which the spring is sitting, then it no longer sees the peak and it cannot look at the spring. And as soon as it would not look at the spring, the heart would expire. For the heart's entire vitality is only from the spring. So that when it stands facing the mountain, then it sees the mountain peak where the spring is. But immediately, as soon as it wants to go to the mountain, the peak is no longer visible. For indeed, such is the way with the tall mountain, standing from afar, the peak is visible, but upon going near, the peak is no longer visible. Then it can no longer look at the spring, and it could, has v'shalom, Shem Yerachem, the heart could expire. And if this heart, Hashem Yerachem, would expire, the whole world would be destroyed. For the heart is the very vitality of everything. And how can the world endure without the heart? Therefore, the heart cannot go to the spring. It only stands facing the spring, longing and screaming without cease to be able to come to it, as we said. And the spring is completely timeless, for the spring is not within time at all. In other words, the spring has no time at all. That is because it is completely above worldly time. So how can the spring exist in the world? For in the world, nothing can exist without time. But all the spring's time is simply the heart giving the spring a day as a gift. And when it comes time for the day to be let out and terminated, and should the day go away from the spring, and should the day go away, the spring would no longer have any time and would depart from the world. And when the spring is no longer, the heart itself would also expire, Hashem Yerachem, and then the whole world would become nullified, Hashem Yerachem, as mentioned. Thus, when it gets very close to the end of the day, and they begin to take leave of each other, the heart and the spring, and then they're giving each other wishes and blessings upon departing. They begin saying wonderful riddles and poems and songs to one another, very fine riddles and songs, with great love and tremendous yearning, one for the other, the heart for the spring and the spring for the heart. Now, the Ish Chesed Emet, the true man of kindness, the man of true kindness, watches over this. And when the day reaches its very end, it needs only to go out, at which very instant, when the day lets out, and the spring shall no longer have any time, have any day, it will pass away, and thus, Rahman al-Islan, the heart will expire too, and the whole world will be destroyed. At that moment, the Ish Chesed Emet, the true man of kindness, arrives and gives the heart a day, and the heart gives the day to the spring. Thus the spring once again has time. That is, that day, the spring can again maintain its existence, and consequently the heart too can maintain its existence. And when this day comes from the place from whence it comes along with riddles too, and with fine poetry, which contain all the wisdoms. There are distinctions between the days, for there is a Sunday, a Monday, and similarly there's the Rosh Chodesh and Yomim Tovim. In other words, according to what sort of day comes along, with what sort of poetry does it arrive. And all the time that the Ish Chesed Emet, the true man of kindness, has, is entirely through me. That is, through the beggar with the speech impediment, the tongue-tied one who's telling all this. For I go along and gather up all the true kindnesses from which all time comes to exist, as mentioned. And therefore, this beggar with the speech impediment, the tongue-tied one, is even smarter than the sage who boasts that he is wise like any day one wishes, for time itself and its days altogether come to exist entirely through him, and the days come along with poetry and riddles containing all the wisdoms, etc. Hence, says the beggar, I have a testimony from the Ish Chesed Emet, the man of true kindness, that I can say riddles and poetry containing all the sciences, because all the days with riddles and poetry come to exist entirely through him, as mentioned. Today, I present you this as a full gift that you should be like me. And there was a great celebration and immense joy. Okay, so this story, I think, as to many of these wonderful stories of Rabbi Nachman, take us a little bit past, or maybe even quite a bit past, the edge of our understanding. But the nakuda, the point that I want to connect to in this story, is the newness of time. Because as we discussed, the 60 pillars of the Mishkan courtyard also correspond to the 60 minutes in an hour and the 60 seconds in a minute, corresponding to the concept that every single moment of our day can and must become connected to our Mishkan vision. And now, one thing that we might notice when we fill our day with fixed daily practices, it can seem as if suddenly we have something of a boring routine. Every day, we're going to do approximately the same thing. And the world might come and tell us that that's not really the ideal of life. The world has a certain value for newness and adventure and so on, right? New experiences, right? That is something to go visit, to travel a new place, to try a new restaurant, to meet new people, right? The world places a lot of value on these things, and there's certainly good in those ideas. But one thing that we're learning here is that the foundation of establishing the space for the construction of our Mishkan is based on our fixed daily practices. As a little side note, the Mishkan, as we've mentioned before, is something that travels with us. Even when we're traveling, on vacation, going somewhere for work, we continue to build our Mishkan. And in each place, we can build our Mishkan completely anew, even if we're not in our physical home, because the Mishkan is a spiritual structure. It's something that Rabbi Yoel was very fond of mentioning, that Reb Nassim, the student of Rabbi Nachman, had something like 1824 seders of learning, that no matter where he was in his travels, and he traveled extensively, that he would be able to continue to construct this Mishkan of his Torah learning. Now, in our, let's call it our regular life, it's actually a very beautiful thing to have these fixed daily practices, and it's not boring whatsoever, because what we see from this story is that time itself is a creation, and that in each day there is a new light that's brought in the creation of that time. And as we build our Mishkan again each and every day by enacting these pillars, building these pillars through the action of our daily fixed activities, so too we can discover a newness in these activities and a new depth and a new joy in these activities. And let me see, I might have a beautiful passage from Rabbi Yoel's book, The Bridge, which we've recently translated into English. Rabbi Yoel says, in this way, all the bitterness in life transforms into sweetness. A person learns to enjoy the journey itself rather than waiting to appreciate life only upon reaching their lofty goals after many years of effort. They find joy and pleasure through their entire life journey. The individual understands that life is not static, it is dynamic, flowing and ever-changing because a greater plan is at work. They recognize their role in this journey is to adapt and to be open to the immense abundance that life offers. And when this realization occurs, they connect with the art of life and with Shalom, leading them to discover what is good in life can become truly fulfilling. As we express our gratitude to Hashem, our understanding deepens, enhancing our ability to manage life effectively. And this gratitude enables us to acquire new skills and capabilities. This cycle of thankfulness and growth continues until we achieve the ultimate state of completeness. So this is the point I want to leave with on our pillars, that at the same time as we are establishing these fixed pillars, and each day we go through a similar cycle of the 60 pillars of establishing the Mishkan walls, the walls of the Mishkan courtyard. By establishing these walls, we open up the space where we can go to the very depths, the most deepest connection to our Mishkan vision, to the connection with our souls, to our connection with the souls of our family. And in doing this, we have the potential to bring a new light, a new joy into these daily activities, and in doing so fills our entire day with immense joy, meaning, and fulfillment. So the homework to connect these concepts is we're going to revisit our list of daily practices, and we're going to continue to grow this list as we mentioned last week. We're aiming for 60 pillars. We can also include in these 60 weekly and monthly fixed practices. And for each practice, we're going to reflect how that activity supports our Mishkan vision. And we'll make a little note explaining this connection. Now, we're going to share our list and our thoughts and our notes with our spouse. And we will continue to combine our personal lists to establish the 60 pillars of our family's Mishkan. Thank you so much, everybody. May Hashem bless us with the vision to establish our Mishkan and to bring this vision into every detail of our life, filling every detail with joy and meaning. Have a beautiful evening.